Hi everyone, welcome to this video. Today we will deal with the concept of arrays in JavaScript. You see, in the previous lectures, we have been storing data inside variables and everything works pretty well. However, we can only store one value at a time inside a variable. So what about situations where we need to save multiple values inside a variable? And that is where arrays come in. So in some programming languages like Python, arrays are called lists. So arrays help us to store data, either related or unrelated, in JavaScript. And data inside arrays are called elements. So arrays are so flexible that not only can they hold multiple values, but those elements inside the array can be of different data types. It can be primitive, like numbers, strings, boolean, or even objects, which are also called reference type. Now let's go ahead and create our first array. Once again, go up here and create a new file. So we come here and create new file, array.js. So this is where we'll be writing our code. To create an array is very simple. Go ahead and do const. What should we create? Okay, let's create an array of cities. Right? Cities. So to create arrays, we don't just write our values outside, we write them inside square brackets. Now, we're going to be writing cities inside it. The first city we write is Lagos. Then the next city, let's say New York. New York, right? Then let's go ahead and add, let's say vaporize. I want to add 4 elements. And the fourth one, let's say Tokyo. So you see, we separate each element using a comma. Now if we go ahead and run the code, we will expect to see everything printed, all the cities printed. Now, cities right now is an array of strings, right? What if we want to create an array of numbers? We can also go ahead and do something like this. Const, what should I name it? My numbers. My number equals something like, let's say 12. And numbers will not be inside quotes. So 12, 45, 67, and let's do 98, right? So there you have it. We have 2 arrays already. Then we can also create an empty array, something like this. Const empty array equals. There you have it. And as I mentioned earlier, we can add different elements, like elements of different data types inside our array. So to do that, let's go ahead and say, I don't know, let's say const my array. Yeah. My array equals, and in this one, we'll be adding elements of different data types. Let's add a string first, do hello. And outside, we separate with a comma, go ahead and add a number like 2, just like that. Then we can say true, which is a boolean. And in fact, we can add objects Okay, something like this. This is an empty object. So we'll do console.log status. So we'll print my number, right? Then my array down here. So I want us to see everything in action before we begin to do things like methods. My array, and the last one, let's say empty array. And for the empty array, of course, there is nothing inside. So when we save and run the code, let's come down here and do node array. So you see Lagos, New York, Valparaiso, Tokyo, 12, 45, 67, 98, hello to true, the empty object, and of course our empty array. So since arrays are type of objects, we can also create arrays with the array constructor available for us in JavaScript. And to do that, we can come down here and say const usernames equals John. Sorry. We are trying to create it using a constructor, right? So we use the new keyword, new array. And inside it, we do something like John, I don't know, Tom. I'm finding it hard to come up with names. Okay, let's use Alex. And that's it. It will also work exactly the same way as our previous arrays. So in array, just like strings, the index of the elements inside arrays starts at 0. For example, in the usernames array, John is at index 0, Tom is at index 1, and Alex is at index 2. So now we know how to create arrays, but that's just one side of the coin. Arrays are objects in JavaScript, so they have methods and properties available for them that we can use to manipulate arrays. And that's the next thing we're going to be doing now, because it's very fun to use array methods. And once again, please do like this video and subscribe to this YouTube channel. It means a lot to me. The very first array property we are going to be talking about is length, right? So let's assume you want to know the number of elements in an array. Use the length property. So let's say console.log cities dot length save. What do we expect to see here? We see 4 because we have 4 elements inside the cities array. So we can also assign the results of the methods and properties to variables. For instance, instead of just saying cities.length right here, we can do something like this. Let's remove the console.log. We can say let my length, I'm just trying to give these things meaningful names, equals cities dot length. So when we come down here, the console.log my length. So we save, come down here and run our code. So we still get 4 because it works the same way. Now, to access individual elements inside an array, that is when we will use the index, like I talked about before. For example, when we say console.log, let me use something like, okay, my array, right? Console.log my array, then we use the brackets and put, let's use 0. So we want to know the elements. Remember, I said counting, it starts at 0. So we want to know the element at index 0. So what do? We save, come down here and run the code. And we see hello, because the element at index 0 in my array is hello. So we see hello in the terminal. So let's come down here and start talking about methods. So when we want to add a new element to the array, we can use the push method. For instance, something like, let's say console.log cities.push and we invoke it. So which city do we want to push? Let's push in London, right? So when we come out here, we save the code, come down here and run it. This is the push. What's going on? Did I save the code? Of course I did save it. Okay, let's comment out. So you see, we get Lagos, New York, Valparaiso, Tokyo, and London is added to the end of it. Now, the next thing we can do is, if we want to add the elements to the beginning of the array, we will use the Onshift method, right? So come down here and say cities.onshift. Cities.onshift, right? And we invoke it. So what should we add at the beginning? Let's add Cape Town. Console.log cities. Console.log cities. And we save the code. Come down here, and what do we get? We get Cape Town added to the beginning of the array. The next methods we are going to be talking about are methods that we use to remove elements from array. And in JavaScript, there are two methods to do that. The very first one is called pop. And pop allows us to remove elements from the end of an array. That means the last element inside an array. So let's go ahead and do something like this. cities.pop invoke it, come down here and console.log cities. So when we save, what do we expect to see? We see that London has been removed, and now we have just Cape Town, Lagos, New York, Valparaiso, and Tokyo. So when we go ahead and run another method now called shift, shift removes the first element in the array. So let's do something. cities.shift. Shift, invoke it, come out here and console.log cities. When we save and come down here and run the code, we see that Cape Town has also been removed. So we use the pop method, it removes London, and we use the shift method and it removes Cape Town. Now the next method we are going to use is called the join method. Now join method, what it does is it takes the elements of an array and returns it as a string, right? So let's come up here and see how it works. So we just go ahead and do console.log and we do how do I write it? cities.join, right? And then we invoke it, come down out here and add our semicolon, save, run the code. What do we see? We see the elements in the array returned as strings: Lagos, New York, Valparaiso, and Tokyo. So there is more we can actually do with the join method, right? We can add any character we want to use to separate each of the elements as strings. Now what we can do is let's just add a slash to save it. You can put anything you want to separate it with. So I'll use a slash, I'll save, and when I come down here to run the code, you see that all the elements inside the array, Lagos, New York, Valparaiso, and Tokyo, have been separated with the slash. So the very last element we are going to be talking about is the concat method. Now we can use the concat method to join the elements of two different arrays together using the concat method. Now, so how do we do it? We come out here and do console.log cities. Let's join cities and one other. Okay, I've used cities. Let me use my array. Yeah, dot concat. Let me add it with my number. Invoke it and add my number. So we'll expect to see the elements of my array and my number printed out together. So let's save the code, come down here and run it. So we see hello, 2, true, the empty object, and all the elements inside numbers. So that's all for this video on arrays and array methods. Now, we are not yet done with the array methods. There are some array methods that are called higher order array methods, right? They are like higher order functions, like map and reduce. And there are others too. Now, their use is beyond the scope of this video. I will create a separate video on higher order array methods after we've treated topics like loops and functions. So from this point, it's going to keep getting more and more interesting, and you'll be able to do more sophisticated things with the skills you are building. And I'll make a separate video once again on that higher order array methods. Now, before we go, we need to look at something. In the previous videos, if we want to know the value, the data type of a value, we use the type of keyword, right? So let's go ahead and try it on. Let's say, know the type of my array, right? We know it's an array, but we want to check the type. So let's do console.log type of my array, right? So we save the code, come down here and run it. So we see type of object down here. We see object, but it's an array. Now, the reason we get an object is because, remember, I've been saying it since the beginning of this JavaScript series that in JavaScript, any value that is not of primitive type, it's an object. Don't think about it in a complicated way. If it's not a primitive, it is an object. Now, since array is not primitive, then that is why we get the object. But if in a situation you truly want to know if what you are checking is an array, then there is something we can do about it. And that is where you use a situation like this, right? So we do console. In a situation like this, you use something like console.log, and you do array.isArray, right? Array.isArray, and this is a method, so we invoke it and we put what we want to check. So let's check my array if truly it is an array. So the way isArray works is that it returns either a true or false. So it returns a Boolean value. So we'll expect to see true because my array is truly an array. So let's save it, come down here and run the code. So we see true, right? We see true. And that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and once again, I would appreciate a sub to the channel. It might not cost you anything, but it definitely means a lot to me. And I'll see you people in the next video. Bye for now.